Good evening and welcome to the Worldwide End Time Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Delory, and I thank you all for tuning into the program this evening. And today's program, I'm going to be discussing or addressing the criticisms of the book of Daniel. Any liberal scholar will never give Daniel the appropriate credit it deserves. Most of them don't believe Daniel is historically or prophetically accurate. I mean, it's really criticisms that are based on their biased opinion, because all you have to do is to look at the book of Daniel, and many of these questions are answered in the internal evidence of the book. For example, many critics place the dating of the book of Daniel in the 2nd century, but the internal evidence of Daniel suggests it tells us it was written sometime in the 6th century BC. And this is a real problem because and it's very important for you to know these things, because when you're debating someone, or if you're just involved in a regular discussion, some people know these things. Some people have read about these things, and so they're going to ask you questions and that will seem to you like a curveball because you weren't even thinking about that. So that's the purpose of this program, to train and educate believers to go out and preach the gospel to others, and hopefully armed with this information, it'll give you just a little bit more of an edge when you're dealing with unbelievers and those who do not want to believe the Bible. And of course, there's also those who just have legitimate questions. There's things they don't understand, and you can answer those questions if you understand what I'm about to share with you. So I'm going to start with the first things first. There's a lot of information here. I am not going to cover all the information that I have gained over the last few days. So I'm just going to deal with a couple of issues and to me, they're the most important reasons for believing that Daniel is an authentic book of the Bible inspired by God. Remember, keep in mind, the book of Daniel was admitted into the canon. And I believe that God watched over the canonization process just like he watched over or inspired those who wrote the Bible. He inspired them. He moved upon them. And I believe he moved upon those who were responsible for canonizing the books we now have in the Old and New Testament. And so it was admitted into the canon. And it's first and foremost endorsed by Jesus. If you read the book of Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, Jesus mentions the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Now, if Jesus didn't believe that Daniel was a legitimate prophet, then he would never have said that. So that's your first clue as to what's going on with the book of Daniel. It's obviously being attacked by those who do not want it to be true. I mean, Satan is going to attack the Word of God every way he can. And he will use those who are Bible scholars and people who are really knowledgeable about the Word of God to use them to attack things in the Bible to discredit the Bible, and in this case, discredit the book of Daniel. That's what they're attempting to do. But these points that I'm about to share with you prove or disprove what they're saying. So, number one, I just mentioned it. Jesus endorsed the book of Daniel. Jesus called Daniel a prophet, and he referred to what's written in Daniel, I believe it's chapter 9, about the abomination of desolation. And Jesus would not have done that if he didn't believe that the book of Daniel was authentic or wasn't reliable in any way. So that's your first clue. Your second clue comes from the prophet Ezekiel. The prophet Ezekiel mentions Daniel in his book, which was written at approximately the same time as the book of Daniel. Ezekiel was written sometime after 593 BC, and Daniel was written somewhere around the same time. So Ezekiel mentions Daniel in chapter 14, verse 14, chapter 20, verses 28, chapter 20 and chapter 28, verse 3. So in all of these mentions of Daniel from the book of Ezekiel, there are those who question whether or not this is referring to the Daniel of the Old Testament or some other Daniel. But let me see. Now I'm getting some information from off the internet, and this is from a website called spiritandtruth.org. And the question, they're referring to this very thing. And the author of this article writes, the question then becomes, when was the book of Ezekiel written? And they say most scholars are in agreement that it was after 593 BC. And so for that reason alone, they believe that the book of Daniel was composed in the 6th century. It makes perfect sense to me. Okay, and then, of course, there is the authorship of Daniel. There are those who question whether or not Daniel was the author or was the only author. Some believe that the book of Daniel was authored by several different writers. And this person addresses this, and I think they do an excellent job. And they say, within the book of Daniel, the issues of date and authorship are so intertwined that if you are convinced of one, you have found the other. Some scholars don't completely agree with that statement, such as Golney Gay. He admits that the chapters manifest a generally consistent viewpoint, though this need not suggest common authorship. He later writes, diversity of authorship might be one of the reasons for diversity of language. Golney Gay lists these as possible authors: a group of Jewish priests, because of the book's concern for the Jews and their Messiah, the group of intellectuals brought to Babylon from Jerusalem, or a group related to the intellectuals. Many liberal scholars believe the author was a descendant of the latter group, a 2nd century Jew who was a member of Hasidim. This is hard to pronounce. Hasidim, I guess that's how you pronounce it. Hasidim, Hasidim, and wrote using Daniel's name. Porphyry, a 2nd century Neoplatonist, was the first to challenge the traditional view which held that Daniel of the 6th century wrote the book named after him. Porphyry, in his writings, directly stated that the book was composed in the 2nd century and thus could not be a product of Daniel. But the most powerful arguments in favor of Daniel being the author is the fact that the book itself reports that it was composed by a Daniel. The following verses contain either me, Daniel, or I, Daniel, and that's in verses 7, verse 28, chapter 8, verse 1, and verse 15, chapter 9, verse 2, chapter 10, verse 2, and 12, verse 5. Other passages may strongly suggest Daniel is the author. Indeed, it is ridiculous to utilize a fraudulent work to teach religious or moral values. Some people are bothered by the fact that the first half of the book is written in the third person. Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. Chapter 6, verse 16. Chapter 7, verse 1. Chapter 10, verse 1. That the second half is written in the first person. As for me, Daniel, chapter 7, verse 28. Such a shift in the style was rather common in antiquity. Certainly, this cannot be used to support the idea that more than one author was involved, because the name Daniel is solidly linked with me or I. And the historical accuracy of Daniel is also called into question, and this author addresses that as well. And he writes, the historical accuracy of the book also confirms that it is more likely that the work was compiled in the 6th century and not in the 2nd century. 2 examples will be given. One has to do with the very first verse. Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 declares, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. This appears to contradict Jeremiah chapter 46, verse 2. To Egypt concerning the army of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, which was by the Euphrates River at Carchemish, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, defeated in the 4th year of Jehoiakim. That's written in the book of Jeremiah chapter 46, verse 2. Nebuchadnezzar invaded both Carchemish and Jerusalem in the same year, 605 BC. Yet Jeremiah makes it clear that 605 was Jehoiakim's 4th year, whereas Daniel says it was Jehoiakim's 3rd year. The difference has to do with the methods Jeremiah and Daniel employed in counting the number of years a king had been reigning. Jeremiah dated the king's reign using the Judean system. That method considered the accession year the first year of the reign. Thus, Jehoiakim was appointed king in 608 by Pharaoh Necho. In 605 would have been his 4th year. Daniel used the Babylonian system, of course, which did not count a king's first year until the beginning of the next calendar year. Therefore, the beginning of Jehoiakim's first year would not start until the next calendar year. A second example concerns the identification of Babylon's last king. Was it Nabonidus or Belshazzar? For many years, scholars were of the opinion that Nabonidus was the last king of Babylon and that Belshazzar was a legendary figure. Not even Herodotus, he was a Greek historical writer, not even Herodotus among the ancient historians mentions him. However, more recent archaeological evidence shows that Belshazzar served as co-regent with his father, Nabonidus, during the last few years of the Babylonian Empire. An inscription found at Ur contains a prayer for a Belshazzar. I can't pronounce this. Just say Belshazzar. It's the same name. A prayer offered only to monarchs. Still, other cuneiform documents record how Belshazzar presented sheep and oxen at the temples of Sippar as an offering of the king. Moreover, Belshazzar bestowed upon Daniel the third, not the second, most authoritative position in the empire in Daniel chapter 5, verse 16. I remember that story from Daniel, or really that incident. I hate to use the term story. Belshazzar was using the vessels from the temple at Jerusalem to party with his friends, more or less. And while he was using those vessels and getting drunk, and they were, blaspheming God and whatever else they were doing at that party, suddenly the fingers of a man's hand appeared on the wall and wrote, Tike, I can't remember the words, Tike, Upharsin. I can't remember. That's right. Tike mine Upharsin. And so they didn't know what this meant, so they called for Daniel. And by this time, Daniel was up in years. And he came in and he interpreted that vision that Belshazzar had. And Belshazzar appointed him third in the kingdom, which seems very strong evidence to support the idea that Belshazzar was a co-regent with his father during the final few years of the Babylonian Empire. So Nabonidus was the king, but Belshazzar was ruler over that part of Babylon for the last few years of its existence, or a ruler of that part of his father's kingdom over the last few years of its existence. And his father was killed at approximately the same time as he was when he was in Arabia. That's where Nabonidus was during those last few years of the Babylonian kingdom, in Arabia, and he was killed there close to the same time that Belshazzar was killed by Darius the Mede here in Daniel chapter 5. So I believe this is really strong evidence that proves that, again, that Daniel is historically accurate, and that this person, Belshazzar, appointed Daniel third over the kingdom because he was second over the kingdom, and his father was, of course, the king. That's the way it seems to work. So there's no other way that you can see it. So there's no reason to say that the historical accuracy of Daniel can be called into question for these reasons, because it doesn't make sense. I mean, you can't say, at first they say, well, there was not even a Belshazzar mentioned, and then the archaeologists have unearthed several things that refer to Belshazzar, and also they have unearthed these cuneiform tablets which offer a prayer to Belshazzar. So it's meaningless to use these reasons to attack the book of Daniel and just try and discredit it, because it doesn't work. So I hope this is helping you, and this is the final point I'm going to make. And let me see if I can find it now. The author, this is the last one, the historical writer, Josephus, in his writings implies that Daniel is the author of the book bearing his name, the evidence which indicates that Christ was wrong about Daniel is virtually non-existent. And so to summarize this, there was little opposition to the traditional view of Daniel for thousands of years. And the fact that that's the case provides some force. The weight of the evidence supports the traditional view, and that is that the book of Daniel was written in the 6th century BC by the man Daniel, and that better fits the facts than does any other theory. So, just to summarize it, all of the evidence that I've just shared with you proves, in my mind, beyond any shadow of a doubt, particularly the fact that Daniel received Jesus' endorsement, the fact that Ezekiel mentioned Daniel 3 times in his own book, which was written around the same time. All of these things combined that I share with you prove to my thinking that the book of Daniel is an authentic book that is to be taken as a part of Scripture, that you cannot discredit it, though you may try. Using these reasons to try and discredit Daniel just makes no sense at all. And so I told you I would be back with a follow-up to the previous night, show from a couple of nights ago now on the book of Daniel. And it took me a couple of days. I had some things going on, and then I had to study for this. I was looking in all the wrong places. I mean, there are many scholarly writings concerning this issue. And you start going through those, and you really find yourself confused. And I happened upon this website, Spirit and Truth, and I would refer you to that if you have any further questions about this book, because it's really, really simplified in a way which is easier to understand than some of those scholarly writings. Because by the time you finish reading the scholarly writings, your head is spinning. They throw at you so much evidence. There's much more evidence than what I've mentioned here, even what this article and this website mentions concerning the authenticity of the book of Daniel. And so I would hope that you would go to this website, spiritandtruth.org, and that will answer any other questions you may have. So I hope this has helped you tonight. I realize that it's been rather extemporaneous and wasn't as put together as well as I had wanted it to be, but this is the only time of the day that I can do the program, and so I had to just go with it live and do the best I could with it. Again, that website that I got most of my information from is spiritandtruth.org. And I have some other announcements to make, of course, referring to my own website, worldwideendtimeradio.com, and endtimenewsreport.com, americanchristianradio.org, and endtimeworldnews.com. All those websites are up and running. Again, they're still under construction. I have a lot more to do, but I've gotten a lot of work done on Worldwide End Time Radio. That's been my biggest success so far, because it's just hard to get everything together with the amount of time I have in a day to write articles and post them on the website. It's really a mess. So anyway, you might want to just go to Worldwide End Time Radio and keep checking back on the other websites, because what I'm going to do is use these other websites in different ways. They're not going to all have the same information. And of course, there's many helpful links on this website. You can go there, and it'll take you to Prophecy in the News, to King James Bible Online. I mean, there's many helpful links there for anyone who wants to check out the site. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out the program. And of course, just let me quickly mention, you can also donate to this ministry. You should go to any of those websites and go to the links. Go to the top of the page on the links. It says GoFundMe. You can push that. It'll take you right to my GoFundMe page, and you can make a donation to this ministry, and a donation of any size would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so for that, I'm going to close out the program, and once again, I thank you for tuning in, and until we meet again, I leave you with this reminder to keep the faith and defend the truth. Good night, everybody.